Hey guys, welcome to Pages with Sidra. This is chapter 26 of Surviving as a Genius on Borrowed Time. So without any delay, let's start.
Feeling a sense of awe. Wan Chang's exclamation confirmed the significance of her identity. Weiji Manhwa, the Cloud Sword Dragon of Zhongnan sect. Her name carried immense prestige, a warrior title associated with the strength and ferocity of a dragon. Despite her transcendent beauty, Yeonshin found his interest piqued not by her appearance, but by the strength she clearly possessed. She was a force to be reckoned with, and that was what mattered most to him. On top of that, she bare to the position of an elder at a young age of 20. Cloud Sword Dragon Weiji Manhwa had become the subject of widespread rumors as a genius who had descended due to heaven's mistake. At the other hand, Mount Hwa's Yu Haiyan, who was 16 like Yeonshin this year, was said to have the greatest potential on Mount Hwa sect, if subjected to 5 years of rigorous, secluded training to reach her level. Born and raised on Zhongnan Mountain, Manhwa had attained the status of a great master at a remarkably young age, while Yeonshin, at least 4 years her junior, never bothered to compare himself due to his frail constitution, a habit he had long cultivated. Wan Chang approached Manhwa and conveyed that it was an honor to meet the revered Weiji Manhwa, known as the Cloud Sword Dragon. Yeonshin acknowledged that their arrival at the Zhongnan main mountain might have been presumptuous and expressed his shame in the presence of the great hero Manhwa. Yeonshin, although younger, joined in the respectful address without diminishing her achievements by referring to her as great hero, not as a female hero. Manhwa's gaze softened as she recalled that, despite young Master Yeonshin having unsheathed his sword first, it was her fellow disciple who had taken the initiative. She explained that everything had transpired swiftly, and on behalf of Zhongnan, she offered her apologies. Her gentle expression toward Yeonshin, her beauty, and her natural representation of the Zhongnan sect made even Wan Chang's awkward and self-conscious remarks seem understandable. Realizing that the honored guests had been waiting too long, Manhwa announced that she would guide them to the main sect, where their purpose could be discussed further. In response, Yeonshin expressed his gratitude in a manner befitting. At the same time, someone descending the mountain and called out to Yeonshin, and as he lifted his gaze, he recognized a familiar face, his second brother, Jung Yeonshin, who stood with a stunned expression. After traversing several rugged mountain peaks, Manhwa emerged from the martial training ground accompanied by an elderly man and a young girl. The girl's eyes widened with joy at the sight of Yeonshin, and she ran to him, calling out to her uncle with the fervor of someone who had longed for his presence after losing her parent overnight. Yeonshin enveloped her in an embrace, and she clung to him as if her heart were mending. With genuine concern, Yeonshin inquired about her well-being, and the girl, known as Haya, nodded amid emerging tears. As Yeonshin reunited with the tearful Haya, Wan Chang could only sniffle at the touching scene. After savoring the heartfelt moment, Yeonshin turned his attention to the elderly man, whose peculiar gaze held his interest. Yeonshin released his embrace on Haya, despite her apparent reluctance. Manhwa then explained that the sect leader and the grand elders had departed to duel with the tyrant sword sect leader, and because the visitors hailed from the desolate fortress, she had brought the highest-ranking elder from the Zhongnan sect who was still present. In response, Yeonshin and Wan Chang exchanged respectful greetings with the old man. With his hand behind his back, the elder slowly introduced himself as Jung Yeol, the Zhongnan sword immortal. Wan Chang could hardly contain his astonishment and almost cried out in reverence, declaring his respect for the sword immortal. Yeonshin, maintaining a calm demeanor as he clasped his hands in return, recalled having observed the desolate fortress lord from afar. Though he revered the elder's reputation, he was not overwhelmed as Wan Chang had been. In his mind, Yeonshin discerned well that Elder Yeol might be even more formidable than his own grandfather, Yeonjiak. Staring intently at Yeonshin, Yeol suddenly inquired about his age. Upon hearing that Yeonshin was 16, Hye, who had been inconsolable at the sight of her uncle, brightened with a radiant smile. Without delay, Yeol suggested showing them something, and despite Yeonshin's internal bewilderment, the Zhongnan sword immortal led them to a secluded side of the mountain, a place that had long occupied his thoughts. On the rough surface of a cliff veiled in a faint mist, various lines had been etched. Yeonshin casually examined the patterns as Manhwa called out to the elder, questioning his remarks made in the presence of an outsider. with an expression that blended incomprehension and determination. She declared that the restoration of the lost nine-yang unified technique was the sole ambition of their sect. Yeol clarified that the sword master, though invited to Zhongnan by the previous patriarch and having inscribed his martial arts onto the mountain in his later years, was not a bona fide practitioner of the sect's true mountain technique. Manhwa attempted to argue, while Hyeo's innocent expression shifted uncertainly between them, puzzled by the unfolding events. With a tone that brooked no disagreement, Yeol explained that his remaining days were few and that if he could glimpse the sword master's blade once more, nothing would be beyond his reach. He continued that although Manhwa was the only one capable of reviving the nine-yang unified technique, she alone could not be entrusted with his final regret, a conviction so potent that everyone sensed the power of his last obsession. Manhwa found herself unable to understand. She could not fathom what quality in a young master, met for the first time, had impressed Yeol so deeply. After studying her perplexed look, Yeol beckoned her attention. Following his silent command, Manhwa's eyes widened as she noticed Yeonshin standing at the mountain's edge, his neck craned in unwavering focus toward the opposite cliff. Clearly, the barely 16-year-old was utterly absorbed. As Yeonshin silently examined the etched sword traces on the cliff, he marveled at the multiple, sharply defined trajectories that defied the wear of time. Those overwhelming marks, he realized, were not products of ordinary human skill, but could only have been forged by someone who had attained the level of void step. Yeol revealed that these marks were the handiwork of the sword master, who had passed away 59 years earlier. Wonchong briefly considered whether the sword master might be Yang Chuan. Yeol recalled that a disciple expelled by Yang Chuan had gone on to establish the Tyrant Sword sect, meaning that every technique of that sect had its origins in the legendary master. Yeol elaborated further, asserting that, aside from the desolate fortress lord, neither god nor demon, few could rival the sword master's prowess. The revelation left Wonchong in stunned disbelief, for it was nearly unimaginable that the sword master could match the might of the desolate fortress lord. Yeol then recounted how the sword master had once taken a starving, seemingly useless orphan like him, brought him to the main mountain, and entrusted him to the previous patriarch's care. When Wonchong inquired why he had not learned the sword master's technique, Yeol explained that fate had not allowed it, and that he himself lacked the necessary talent. Many of the sect's swordsmen had tried, yet the path of the sword was not one navigated by broad knowledge or sheer martial prowess. The assembled masters had agreed that only a sudden flash of inspiration could ever trace the true path of the sword master. As Wonchong concentrated on the sword path, he furrowed his brow at a phrase boldly inscribed in one stroke within the mist on the cliff. The worthy one shall obtain it. Yeol affirmed that this was a matter solely of innate talent. The entire hope of the sect for deciphering this technique rested on Manhwa. Even if she did not outwardly display its burden, its weight was unmistakable. Manhwa, renowned as the unprecedented genius of the Zhongnan sect, wore a look of deep perplexity. Even she could not fully grasp the significance of the situation, which transcended personal capability. Before long, the luminous aura that had encircled Yeonshin's head faded, leaving him simply grateful for another opportunity to grow stronger and inspired to create his own sword technique. After a long, steady exhalation, Yeonshin emerged from his concentration on the sword trace. Then, in a manner reminiscent of a grandfather calling his grandson, Yeol called Yeonshin. When Yeonshin turned to meet his gaze, the Zhongnan sword immortal, unspoken curiosity, inquired what it was that the young man had seen. Yeonshin did not give out a response as an arc formed on his lips. Instead, Yeonshin slowly drew his desolate sword. Meanwhile, Manhwa could scarcely believe that a youth barely 16 years old could truly decipher such an intricate technique. The white blade of the desolate fortress shone brilliantly under the sunlight, and as Yeonshin performed the Jung dynamic technique, a faint blue light ignited in his eyes, attesting to the profound understanding he had attained.
Hey guys, if you watched the video till the end, make sure to subscribe for more.